Right then, let's get started. So yeah, just to recap what we said about Ionian tunes. There are four folk modes. Ionian is just another name for saying a major scale, a major key. So if the tune's in G Ionian, for example, it's G major, that's the same thing. In an Ionian tune, the main chords are 1, 4, and 5, and those three are all major. So you go through the scale for whichever key you're in. So G major has an F sharp in it, for example. So your scale for G major would be G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and then G. Chords 1, 4, and 5 then are going to be G major, A, B, C major, and D major. And those are going to be your three main ones. And then we said chord 5 goes every 7th time you tap your foot. There's a bar of chord 5. Every other time you get to that point, it has to come back to chord 1, and that is because that is the end of a section. A section's 8 bars long, and you do 2 foot taps per bar. So, yeah, your chord 5s go on the 7th foot tap for 2 foot taps, and then the next time you get to the 7th foot tap, you do chord 5 and straight back to chord 1 to make the bar sound finished, and that finishes off your section. Furthermore, we discovered that if you listen to the tune, you can hear sections that sound chord 4 E, and you put chord 4 on those. Quite self-explanatory, really. And then, as well as that, we said for the three minor ones, you can substitute them. So where you've got chord 1, you can put in chord 1's related minor. As well as that, if you get bored of playing chord 1, you can switch to chord 4 or chord 4's related minor. In a chord 4 section, you can only play chord 4 or chord 4's related minor. And then I made another little video with another type of substitution you can do, which is that for the key of G major, for example, if you go 2 forward in the scale, so G, A, B, B minor is also a valid substitute for G major. So if you go 2 forward in your chord options, you get to another one which can be substituted for a chord. So in a for C, you can substitute E minor for C, D, E as well. So that's another substitution option. And that's about where I got to at the end of the last stream on this topic. For let's look at Dorian tunes first, because they're very, very common. They're the most common type of minor tune in Celtic music. There's two types of minor tune. There's Dorian and there's aeolian. Aeolian is a sort of pessimistic minor, and Dorian's the kind of more optimistic minor, which I suspect is why it's more common than the other one. Now, if you take a major scale and you play all of the same notes, but starting and finishing on the second one, you'll end up with the Dorian mode of that second note. So what your ears will hear, they'll infer from the fact that it starts and finishes on that note, that that is their kind of bass, their key note, the root, and they'll infer from that that it must be that one Dorian that they're hearing, a kind of minor tune with an optimistic flavour to it. So I'll demonstrate that. Here's G major as a scale. And if I play all those same notes, so G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G again, but I'm going to start on A instead and add an A on the end, it'll go. And that sounds like a kind of optimistic A minor scale, and that's what the Dorian mode is. So, chords for that, because it's made out of the same set of notes as G major, that also means you've got the same set of chords as G major. And I can show you this much more easily using the amazing mode wheel, which you can get at finaleguitar.co.uk/shop. These are my own invention. and they work like this. I should be on one of those late night shopping channels, shouldn't I? Like, the amazing nose wheel from JML, whatever. Other craft brands are available. Anyway, yeah, so G. Yeah, it is a Les Barker t-shirt. And actually, I've got absolutely hundreds of them because years ago I had a website that sold them and I've got absolutely loads left. So I've been wearing them for years now. I've got loads. So if you know anyone that wants one, drop me a message. Anyway, so yeah, there's G major. That's all the notes in G major. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G again. And now we're going to be playing in A Dorian, so that's the same notes because it's related. It's the second mode and it starts on the second degree of the scale. So our main chords are now going to be 1, 4, and 5, but starting from A minor. So A minor, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, D major, and 5 is going to be E minor. So in the same way that we did with the major tune before, you can divide the tune up into 1, 4, and 5 sections. The exact same rule applies re chord 5. So 7th foot tap, chord 5 for 2 foot taps. Second time you get to the 7th foot tap, chord 5 for 1 foot tap, and then back to chord 1. I'm going to play a jig here. It's called Slieve Russell. I found a few different versions of it. I've got one that's played nice and slowly on a mandolin by somebody called Plucking Strings, which you can find on YouTube for free. So I'm going to just play it, and I'm going to play just A minor and E minor. So that's my chords 1 and 5, and put E minor in the right places so you can see where it goes. I won't worry about what the other chords are for now.
Plug in the strings.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back. And so on. I could do the same for the B part, and I could do it with my guitar in tune as well. So, next thing is to have another listen back to that A part that I just played and work out if there's any bits where a chord 4 needs to go. The reasons why chord 4 might need to go somewhere. Hey Olivier, welcome back. The reasons why chord 4 might need to go somewhere are basically that the dominant beats in that bar are notes which are from chord 4 instead of notes which are from chord 1. So, for example, chord 1 is in this case made up of an A, a C, and an E. That's your A minor chord. And chord 4 is made up of D, F sharp, and A. That's your D major chord, chord 4. So if there's any bars in the A section of this tune that have one of the two dominant beats, the ones that your foot is tapping on, playing one of the notes from chord 4, then I'm going to want to stick chord 4 or something related to it there. And I generally tend to like to divide tunes into sections of a bar. So I give a chord to each bar in my kind of framework. Very occasionally you'll find a tune where half a bar is better. You just got to trust your ears on that one really, but it's easier to think in blocks of a bar. So let's do it that way for now. So let's have a listen through and see if there's any really chord 4-y bits. So in that A part, there are no chord 4-y bits. It all sounds very chord 1-y. You can play A minor under all of it, apart from the 7th foot tap bits, and it'll never sound wrong. So that's our chord 4 bits out the way for the A part. We don't have to worry about them because there aren't any. So the next thing is we don't want to just play chord 1 all the way through the A part, apart from the 7th foot taps where it's chord 5, because that's going to be boring on the guitar. So the third rule of folk backing, if you like, is that anytime you've been playing chord 1 from it, you can switch to chord 4. That was true in the major keys, and it's just as true in the minor keys, like this one, Dorian. So I'm going to go through, and now I'm going to play along with the A part. I'm going to just stick a D in when I get bored of playing A minor. So, yeah. Here comes the D. Okay. So what I was doing there was something along the lines of 1 bar of A minor, another bar of A minor, 1 bar of D, and then 1 bar of E minor, 1 bar of A minor, another bar of A minor, 1 bar of D, and E minor back to A minor. And that's the whole of the A part. After that, the next thing we did in the Ionian version was we started adding in substitutions, and our 1, 4, and 5 chords then were all major, and we subbed them for their related minors. Well, now our chord 1, for example, is minor, so we're going to sub it for a related major instead. So with a major chord, we went 3 semitones back, or 2 steps back through the scale that we were in, whichever you prefer to think of. And this is the exact opposite of that. So for an A minor chord, if I go up 3 semitones from A minor, I get to C. So C major is related to A minor, or you can think about it in terms of the scale. So A, B, C. So it's 2 steps forward through the scale. Bear in mind when you're doing this, you need to keep the key signature. So A Dorian's the 2nd mode, so it's the same key signature as G major. So G major's got an F sharp in it. So if at any point there's an F kind of key that you get to, it's going to have an F kind of chord rather. It's going to have to be an F sharp kind of chord for this. Anyway, so yeah, now I'm going to play the tune, except that as well as using chords 1 and 4, I'm going to switch chord 1 to its related major at some point. So there were a few different versions there. I stuck both C and D in random bits of the chord 1 section. And you can hear there, they both sound good. A good little trick to think about is if you're ascending with your chords, it adds energy. If you're descending, it kind of makes it sound sad. So there where I went from A minor up to C, and then up to D, and then up 1 more up to E minor, and then resolved back to A minor. So it turns into House of the Rising Sun. But no, anyway, if you're going up, it's got a nice kind of feeling of progressing upwards to it, and then coming back home again, and then progressing up again. You know, like MC Escher and his Infinite Stairs. Hi Ed, thanks for your message. Has your mode wheel arrived? Still not yet. We'll find out. Anyway, the next substitution, chord 5 in our Dorian mode. Chord 5 is E minor, and in the minor keys you can substitute chord 5. In the major key you can't, it's got to be chord 5 back to 1 at the ends of sections, but in minor keys, so Dorian and aeolian, subbing chord 5 is fine. So let's have a little look at the mode wheel. There's our chord 1, A minor. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There is chord 5, E minor. And instead of playing E minor as chord 5, we can play its related major, which is 2 forward round the scale. So pop, pop. So we can play G major instead of chord 5, and that'll be a nice little substitution. Generally speaking, in Dorian, I tend to use chord 7 instead of chord 5, which is chord 5's related major, just because I prefer the sound of it. But anyway, they're both good options. Because Dorian's a kind of more optimistic minor mode, I like it to have a more optimistic finish with a major chord coming back to the root chord. The minor chord coming back to the root chord kind of sounds a bit darker. I'm an optimist. Happy to stick the major chords in. Why not? Anyway, so this time I'm going to play just something where I use all of the chord options, and because it's all a chord 1 section apart from my chord 5s, I can use any of the chords that are available. There's one other substitution available which I didn't mention as well, which is we go back to our list of chords that are available. So there's our chord 1. There's a B minor here, which we haven't mentioned. Well, B minor, it's a substitute for D major, which is chord 4. D major's related minor is B minor, 2 steps back through the scale. So anytime I would be playing chord 4, I can play B minor instead if I want. Yeah, so it's a chord 4 sub, which means that I can also play it anytime I would be playing chord 1, because anytime you're playing chord 1, you can play chord 4 if you want. Good. So, yeah, here is Sliabh Russell once more with a complete mixture of all the chords, something like this. Like that. And remind me, what tune are we playing along with? We're playing along with a tune called Slieve Russell. Actually, do you know what I should have done is the version of it that I'm playing along with, which is from a mandolin tutorial channel called Plucking Strings. And yeah, they're pretty handy, their videos, because they play the tunes really slowly and clearly, and they play them with a couple of variations as well, so you can always learn some little extras if you're trying to learn some tunes. Yeah, so there's that. Right, I'm going to play through the B part, because the B part has some bits that sound better being chord 4-y, so that's going to kind of place some constraints on which chords we can play in which bits. So here comes the B part. Pause it there. So the B part kind of goes da, 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 da. That's all chord 1-y. Da, 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 da. That's probably better with a chord 5-y feeling bit, actually. Can I explain to you why that is? Yes, I can. It's because because it's got it's got that long note there. The third one, that is the sixth note in the key of A Dorian. The sixth note appears in chord 4. I said chord 5 before, didn't I? Sorry, I meant chord 4. Yeah, the sixth note appears in chord 4 because 4, 6, and well, 4, 6, and 8 are the notes that are in chord 4. So because it's got that long, it's a C, it's an F sharp. Because it's got that long F sharp, it sounds quite chord 4-y, that bit. So I'd put chord 4 there, which is D major. D, 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 da, da, da. Then back to chord 1. Da, 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 da. There again, you've got a long F sharp. You've got an F sharp right at the beginning of the bar. Da, 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 and it's ending on D. So that's basically outlining a D chord for half a bar there. So I put a D chord there as well. So chord 4 there because it sounds chord 4-y. Chord 1, very chord 4-y. And then it has to be chord 5 because that's the bit where you always put chord 5. Then back to chord 1, chord 4 here. Chord 1 and the end of the section. That kind of thing. So substitution options wise, that's limited us a little bit. It's not like the first half where we could have just had any of the chords at any point because it all sounded chord 1-y, so you can just stick whatever the hell you want there. In this bit, every other bar, effectively, is chord 4-y, so you can only have things that are related to chord 4. So bar 1 is going to be chord 1 because it's the start of a section, and we always have our root chord to let people know where they are, what their home key center is, you know. Then bar 2 is chord 4-y, so we can have chord 4, which is D major. We could have its related minor if we wanted to, which is B minor. Sound like a minstrel. Oh, thank you. Cheers. Yeah, I'm actually named after a bard, so maybe that makes sense. Maybe that's my true calling. I should have a lute or a lyre, and yeah, go minstrelling about the country. Anyway, yeah. So chord 4 on the second bar, or chord 4 related minor, which is B minor. So let's have a listen what that would sound like. I'm going to play chord 1, and then chord 4, and then chord 1, and then chord 4 related minor, just so you can see that they both work. Just take the tune back a bit to the end of the A part. Chord 4. Yeah. So you can hear there, although there's not really anything wrong with using B minor there, it didn't really sound that great. This time instead, I'm going to change the first chord bar, so the second bar of the B part. I'm going to put B minor there instead, and you'll hear that sounds a lot better. And the way that I'm going to make it sound better is because then instead of going from A minor to B minor, and then coming back to A minor, and then going down to E minor, which is my chord 5, that's kind of like you've started out on a journey up the scale, and then you've given up and gone home, and then hopped to chord 5 for no particular reason, and then hopped back. It just sounds like, what was the point of that progression? It didn't go anywhere, you know, it didn't progress. So instead of that, I'm going to do A minor, then B minor, which sounds a little bit like kind of roadblock, but then I'm going to go up to C, which lets that progression keep going up the chord stairs, if you like, and then via D to chord 5. So I'm just going up the scale. Here we go. The sound's gone. Oh, there it is. B minor, C, D, A minor, B minor, C, E, back to A. So you can see there you can use chord 4s with A minor. Sounds pretty nice. It sounds better if you go on up from it. So that you're kind of making stairs. Just as a general principle as well, a chord progression that always sounds good is just to go up or down. Talking of going down, let's try that for the B part. So this time I'm just going to go down from A minor down to E. Let's have another quick look at the mode wheel because there's one other chord on here which I haven't mentioned. So if we've got A Dorian there, A minor is our key chord. Our 7th chord is G major. And then we get to this one, which is F sharp, because that's the 6th note in A Dorian. And it's F sharp diminished. And I've said this before, diminished chords, they're cool. They've got lots of interesting properties for other stuff, but they don't sound very good in folky contexts. They're a bit kind of uncomfortable. They always feel like they need to resolve upwards to the chord above. Sometimes you don't want to do that. So just generally people tend to avoid them. And instead of using F sharp diminished, I'm going to use this really useful shape, which is useful in loads of keys as well, especially G major. But it's useful in this one as well, A Dorian. So what you do, you make a D major chord and you stick your thumb over the top so that it's fretting an F sharp chord. And that is a really good substitute. So you don't have to play F sharp diminished. You play D with a thumb instead, which is sometimes notated as D/F sharp, which just means a D with an F sharp at the bottom of it. So my descending chord scale for the B part is going to be A minor, G major, D with a thumb, E minor at the end. And then I have to do E minor back to A to finish it off. So we'll try that along. What I'm going to do actually, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go up the scale for one B part and then down the scale for another B part, so you can see what they sound like. And then I'll shut up about Dorian and we'll move on to the other two modes, which work in exactly the same way, so I won't spend as long waffling about them. So going up, B minor, C, D, down, A minor, G, D with the thumb, E back to A. Yeah, so that's two cool options. Anyway, so my conclusion for Dorian is that it works exactly the same as what we said about Ionian tunes before. The first thing to do is listen through to the tune at least once through and work out if there are any bits where chord 4 has to go. Trust your ears on that one, and no one's going to get annoyed if you play along quietly. This is what I always say, you know, you can't necessarily do everything with just your ear. Imagine what the chords are going to sound like. If you play chord 1 and chord 4 over different bits and just play around with it quietly until you get a kind of framework in your mind for where 1 and 4 should go. And obviously chord 5 every 7th foot tap. After that, you can start messing with your substitutions. If it's a chord 1E bit, happy days, play whatever you want. You've got 6 or 7 chords to choose from, and you can put any of them there, so long as you start on the root chord. If it's a chord 4E bit, you can only have the ones that are related to chord 4. So in this case, D with a thumb, or B minor, which is its related minor. And if it's a chord 5E bit, you can have chord 5 or its related major. That's it for Dorian. Good. Oh, there is another really cool thing you can do with Dorian, but I'm not going to talk about it in this video. If you want to know more about messing with people's heads using a combination of Dorian and Aeolian in the same tune. It sounds really cool, and you can do loads of good chromatic wizardry with it, and actually get some use out of the diminished chords as well if you like the sound of them. You can find out more about that in my ebook, which you can get on the shop page, which I've already mentioned, finaleguitar.co.uk/shop. I'll put a link to it as well, just in case anybody feels the need to go right now and